So welcome everyone. I am Dr. Katrina Kreider. I'm chiropractor here at A Touch of Health, and we are getting ready for our big self-love event at the end of the month. And I'm here with another one of our fabulous vendors. I am here with Samara of Cinagro Wine, and today we're going to be talking about organic wine and why that is so important for us. So welcome, Samara.
Thank you. Hey, everybody.
Why don't we start by you telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name's Samara. Like Katrina said, I've been in Atlanta for 4 years. Previous to that, I lived pretty much my entire adult life in New York City. And before that, I grew up in California. Just kind of the story that brings me to how I got into wine. I've always been a vegetarian since I was a little kid, and I've always been a grower and a maker. And I had a lot of berries, or what I thought were berries, growing in my backyard in college. And I ate one, it was terrible. And then I thought, oh my gosh, is this an invasive berry species that could potentially hurt my plants, which is completely ridiculous. And so I brought it to agriculture department at my college in Northern California. And they said to me, they're like, where on earth did you get this? And I'm like, well, I got it in my backyard. And they said, okay, this is old vine Zinfandel that's been growing wild. They're like, you should make wine. And I'm like, yes, I should make wine. So I just kind of got into some really cool winemaking classes. And one thing led to another, led to another, led to another. And before I knew it, I had a minor in viticulture and enology, which is the geeky, sciencey stuff behind making wine. It's the science of wine. It's the study of viticulture is the study of winemaking, and enology is the scientific study of wine grapes. And I also became a sommelier. And I never really had a focus to go into that for my career. I just really enjoyed it. It was really fun for me. And it was that, the really cool classes that I took to feed my brain. And so I've kind of always done wine and the beverage world on the side a little bit. It's been my side hustle, but I've never really done it as a career. And then after I had kids, I had been working as a strategist in the nonprofit sector, always on the road. I call it a suitcase job. It just wasn't very conducive for having the type of family I wanted to raise and being the way that I wanted to be and how I envisioned my future. I was kind of done with the hustle and the grind, and I just wanted to do something different. So I started my business, which is Cinagro Wine Experience. The cool thing about the name of my business is Cinagro is spelled with a C, and it's just organic spelled backwards, which is kind of cool.
I love that. I love that. I think it's such a cute play on words. And then everybody knows what your business is about once you tell them that little key. Can you tell us the difference between conventional wine and organic wine?
Yes, absolutely. So very similar to how we think about our produce and how do we think about the food that we put in our body. Similar to strawberries or blueberries or an apple, wine is an agricultural product. So it is also susceptible to anything that any other agricultural product is susceptible to. So pesticide accrual and things of that nature. And so conventional wine is wine that is made conventionally, where there may be, not in every scenario, but there may be the use of pesticides and other chemicals in the winemaking process. So something we don't realize is the way we make wine, we don't just pick a bunch of grapes, crush them, and then let them ferment, and then voila, we have wine. There is a lot of science and a lot of technology and a lot of stuff that goes into making wine. And believe it or not, there's actually a lot of chemicals in conventional wine. Some of them are harmless and some of them are kind of harmful. And so it's really important to understand what goes into our wine so we can understand how we can make the best decisions about our body and what we put into it. So there's a lot of different ways we can be drinking cleaner and be drinking better wine. So when we're talking about organic wine, we have wine that's made with organic grapes, which is akin to an organic strawberry or an organic blueberry. I don't need to explain that. We all know what makes strawberries and blueberries organic, right? But then there's also wine that's made organically, and wine that's made organically is in most cases made with organic grapes. But then we also have a few other little terms that I could briefly describe. We have sustainable wine, we have biodynamic wine, and we have natural wine. So going back to the organic definitions, explained it already, organic wine made with organic grapes is wine that's made with fruit that was grown organically. We all understand what that means. But then when we talk about organically made wine, we're talking about no synthetic or man-made chemicals going into the winemaking process, that any sort of an additive or a preservative or a component that goes in and improves the wine and makes the wine better is going to be a natural or organic product. So for example, in conventional wine, a lot of conventional wines are actually made with food dyes, like Red 40. We're all familiar with those, and we're familiar with some of the negative impacts that those could have on our bodies. You know, we don't like to give those food dyes to our children, so we never think of wine as having a food dye, but wine that's manufactured, which is like when we think of food that's manufactured, food that's heavily marketed and we buy in the supermarket, wine is the same way. The wine you see in the supermarket is manufactured, whereas wine you may find in a boutique or that's made by hand and that's processed in a different way is not manufactured. It's a more artisanal and boutique product. So wine that's made organically is not going to have any of these additives. Some of the other additives you may find in conventional wine are things like gelatin. And then there's also something called concentrate. It's kind of a word that winemakers give to this product that's made. It's made in a factory, a lab, and it's sold to winemakers, and it's a sugar product. So it's mostly akin to, I would say, like a high fructose corn syrup. It's a heavily processed, often corn-based sugar product that goes into the wine to kind of give wine that right level of sweetness and viscosity. Something we don't realize is that, you know, in America specifically, a lot of winemakers are putting a lot of extra sugar, this sugar product, back into the wine. And the reason is they want the wine to have that perfect flavor and that perfect sweetness, which is, in my perspective, kind of ruining the wine. But a lot of the wines you find in the supermarket, unfortunately, are going to have those additives put into them. And they don't need to be disclosed on the bottle because, again, wine is an agricultural product. You don't need to put a label on an orange to say what's in an orange. We've just kind of taken what is truly an agricultural product and we've added a lot of stuff to it and we've manipulated it to give it a certain taste to kind of appeal to, you know, a palate that a lot of people have. And so, you know, there's a lot of us purists out there in the winemaking world that don't necessarily agree with that. And, you know, we know there has to be a better way. So that's kind of the organic wine definition, right? It doesn't have any of the yucky stuff in it. Mm-hmm. It's got only, you know, natural preservatives and additives. And so another little tip to give everybody is about sulfur. A lot of people say, oh, does the wine have sulfites? I can't have sulfites. If you have 3 dried apricots, those dried apricots have more sulfites in them than a whole bottle of wine. So sulfites aren't necessarily bad. Some people do have adverse reactions to them. Some people can't eat dried fruit. Some people can't drink a lot of wine because the sulfites give them a headache. And I'm going to talk in a minute a little bit about wine without sulfites too. So then we have, I talked about sustainable wine. Wine that's made sustainably is oftentimes those winemakers are using predominantly more organic farming practices when available. Sometimes it's impossible to use organic farming practices because you need some sort of a chemical on the grapes that's going to kill the mold because it may be in a high humidity area. For example, like the North Fork of New York. It's very difficult to find organic wine that comes out of there just because it gets so humid there. And same like in Georgia, like the wines that are made in Georgia, you'll never find an organic wine made in Georgia. Just that's because of all the mold that happens on the grapes when later on in the season, it's just impossible. So sustainable wine growing is they're being as sustainable as possible. You know, they have a good intention and they're doing the best they can, but sometimes they need to intervene with a bit of a chemical here or there to preserve the wine grapes and to be able to make the wine. Because sometimes it's impossible to make wine in certain regions without that. So sustainability is really more about good intentions and being good stewards of the land. Then that brings us to biodynamic farming. So biodynamic farming is pretty amazing. I'm really, really into it in a really geeky kind of way. And basically what biodynamic farming means is effectively it means you're being a good steward of the land, but you're doing certain things. So you're not exhausting the land and destroying the soil where the wine grapes are by solely packing in as many wine grapes as you can. you're growing wine grapes. Maybe you have some lemon trees. Maybe you have some olive trees. You've got wildflowers. And also, instead of using a chemical fertilizer or even an organic fertilizer that's made with organic chemicals, you're using sheep manure, cow manure, goat manure to fertilize the land. And so you're putting nutrients back into the soil and caring for it. And you're also doing something that's a little woo-woo to some people, not to me, because again, I love this stuff, is you're using astrology, very similar to the Farmer's Almanac, to help determine how and when you harvest and how you care for the land, as opposed to using solely science, which may say, okay, our first frost is coming in 3 weeks, potentially, we should harvest. You're saying, well, what is the position of the moon and what does astrology tell us to do that will make the best possible wine? And so that's really cool. So you imagine all of the thought and the care and the love that goes into that bottle of wine. It's really something to behold and to cherish. And in my mind, I think it tastes better because of all that care and love and thought that goes into it. And then kind of I would say like the 2.0 is natural wine. So natural wine is wine that's made in a very low intervention manner. As I said before, a lot of technology and process goes into making wine. Natural wine kind of says, I'm not too sure. Let's make wine the way they used to make wine in Greek and Roman times. Yeah. Let's not touch the wine. Let's not intervene so much. Let's have a very hands-off approach, and let's let nature and the magic of the wine grapes kind of take over. So it's very low intervention, very little additives, and in many cases they don't even use sulfur. So a lot of natural wines are kind of like a don't drink, a don't keep, like drink it now type approach. So if we're talking about clean wines and how could you drink cleaner, the most clean wine you could get would be a natural wine, because it's of course going to have the least amount of stuff and the least amount of intervention. It's going to be like fermented grape juice. You're never going to find a natural wine that tastes like your favorite Napa Cab, I'm sorry to say. However, if you do like really beautiful, lighter red wines, maybe even slightly effervescent red wines, and you like a little bit of what I call barnyard, like you can smell the farm in your glass of wine, then you'd love a natural wine. And of course, at the event, I'm going to have mostly natural wines. I'm also going to have some that are solely organically made and biodynamically made. So you can kind of taste a little bit of everything.
So one of the common complaints that we hear with a lot of women in the office who drink wine are, I can't drink that because it gives me a headache. And I think that it's gotten labeled as the sulfites give the headache. Safe to say, with what you just told us, maybe not true because there's so much in there?
Right, exactly. When people tell me I get migraines from wine, I'm allergic to tannins or I'm allergic to sulfites, obviously I believe anything and everybody tells me because we're all going with the information that we have, right? But what people don't realize is the amount of sugar that's added to their wine. And if you think about a night out with your girlfriends in your 20s, before you knew a lot about beverages, and you're drinking those Cosmopolitans or those Screwdrivers or the Long Island iced tea, and you wake up the next morning and you feel like you have this headache and your head's going to split open, it's not from the vodka or whatever, the alcohol, it's from the sugar. It's from the combination of the sugar and the alcohol. Sugar and alcohol don't mix. And so my policy, I just don't drink wine that has any sort of sugar added to it unless it's an organic sparkling wine. It just makes you feel sick, And so my thought and my perspective is, in most cases, that is what is causing people to feel sick. But you know what? Everybody's body is different. So I can't make a blanket statement. But in most cases, it's not the sulfites, I think. And in most cases, it is the sugar and just the stuff in the wine that my clients and my friends and my family, myself too, I'm a migraine sufferer myself, and I drink exclusively organic, biodynamic, and natural wines. And I will say that I don't get headaches from wine anymore, and I don't get sick from wine anymore. You just feel better. And also the wine has a lower alcohol content too, because, some of us may know, any of us who have been a home brewer or taken a science class or know anything about amateur fermentation, is that what happens to the sugar in the winemaking process is it converts to alcohol. And that's why so many winemakers add so much sugar. It's because so much of the sugar converts to alcohol. And so you can no longer taste the sweet taste in the wine. So they need to overcompensate with the sugar. So only a certain amount of it converts to alcohol. And then you still have some sweet sugar flavor left over in the wine. However, when you're getting to a 14 and a 15% alcohol level and you're still adding sugar in, you are taking in such a high level of alcohol and so much sugar, it's just not good for your body.
So I know that you are curating a fabulous selection for us. However, if you're out in the store and you wanted to pick up a bottle of wine that was more organic or natural or biodynamic, is there anything you can look for? Or is there a local store or a boutique that you can go to? Like, where can people find these kind of wines out in their daily lives?
That's a great question. And the answer is multi-part. So I'll kind of walk you through it. So the first part to the answer is that it's not always the easiest to find them, because in order to be certified organic or certified biodynamic, and every country has its own organic certification, and most of them are pretty similar. They all have very high standards. There's nothing to worry about if you would get a wine from Portugal, say, and is their organic as good as the United States organic? That's not anything you have to worry about. But the one thing is, it costs a lot of money. It costs between $500,000 and $750,000 for a winemaker to get that type of certification, depending on the country. And it could even be close to $1 million. And so when I'm talking about the winemakers who are making wine in the right way, these boutique small farmers, they can't afford that. And that means they can't say the wine on the bottle has been made organically. Oftentimes, if the wine says it's been made organically and they have the certification, it's getting closer to a manufactured product. You know what I mean? So it's very similar to how we go to the farmer's market and we find all these really amazing locally made products, and you're like, can I buy that in Kroger? It's like, well, no, because they don't have the resources to get into Kroger. They don't have the ability to produce enough to supply, Kroger's entire supply chain. The same is true for wine. And so oftentimes it says nothing. And so you have to do a little bit of research. And so one of my tips is that if you Google a wine type, like say, I'm Googling, a Mencia from Bierzo, Spain, made by Raul Perez. I could search all those things. And then I also put tech sheet into my search terms, and that will pull up the technical sheet for the wine, and it'll tell you about the vinification, which is the way the wine's made in the farming. And so it'll tell you if the wine is organic and if it's made organically or biodynamically, or if it's more of a natural wine. So that's one way you could do it. Some people just they're like, I don't want to be pulling out my phone and Googling a million wines. I want to grab and go. And so another tip I have is looking at French wines. So French and Italian wines are quite often made in a very low intervention style. They are old world wines. We call them old world wines because a lot of times those wine grapes and those winemaking techniques have been around for a very long time, and they're made in a much more lower intervention style. The new world is, American wines, like a lot of New Zealand wines, Australian wines, Chilean wines, Argentine wines, a lot of these newer wine regions. And so a lot of them are for the most part, making more wine for mass, for mass consumption. And so you just don't get a lot of, and not to say those regions, I don't want to send a message that those regions are making wine in that way, because they're really not. There are a lot of really amazing boutique wines, but if we have to make a general statement, you're typically safer with a French wine or an Italian wine. So that's kind of the quickest grab and go.
That's like a fantastic tip, because every time when you're out to dinner, what you get on the wine menu is usually the wine and where it's from. So that's just something easy that you can do when you're out. I love that tip.
Yeah, it's a great tip, and it's like kind of an easy one. If you're not familiar with the wine, if you're not familiar with the winemaker, and you don't want to be that guy who whips out your phone and starts researching, looking at the ingredient list, so to speak, you can very easily just ask for something that's French or Italian, and oftentimes even Spanish too. We see a lot of more lower intervention winemaking styles from those three countries. And so in addition to that, in terms of where you can shop, I can give you a bunch of different shops throughout Atlanta. One is I have a partnership with Cellar Filler, and I curate a monthly organic, biodynamic, and natural wine club that's fulfilled through my retail partner, Cellar Filler. So you can get on my list. The pickup location is in Sandy Springs, so it's convenient for a lot of people. And so you can order any wine you like and then just come pick up at Cellar Filler's location. And that's usually the easiest. And, everything that I curate is going to pass the standards. Everything is going to be organic, biodynamic, or natural. So at least you're drinking clean wine when you buy it through Cellar Filler. And so that's one. If you live more in town, I highly recommend Perrin's Wine, and I recommend Three Parks. Those are my two favorite wine stores that have the greatest selection of natural wines. And, come to the event, get my business card. You can text me anytime. I always respond. If you're ever in a wine store and want to know a little bit more about a wine or want to know what you could potentially buy, I'd be more than happy to share that with you. So just a little bit more information about those.
I love it. You can come get your adjustment in Sandy Springs and then go pick up your case of wine.
Exactly. Almost every time after I get my adjustment, I go over to Cellar Filler to meet customers coming to pick up their wine.
So I think when most people think organic, they think expensive. So let's talk about, because I've purchased your wines and I was shocked the first time I saw some of the price points. Let's talk about the different price points that these wines fall into, so that people can understand that they're so affordable. It's just like buying a regular bottle of wine.
Absolutely. Just like anything, there is a range. Wine bottles can cost anywhere from $10 to $5,000. There's definitely a range in the cost of wine. And I think my sweet spot and what I try and bring to the table is, I think the hardest area to find amazing wine is in like the $15 to $40 range.
Yes.
Because the market is flooded and you can buy a $15 wine and you drink it and you're like, I can't even drink this. It's so bad. Or you can have a $15 wine and you're like, this is so good. I think I just changed my own life. And so it's kind of one of those things. And so that's what I bring to the table. All the wines that I feature are between $15 and $40 with a heavy concentration in the $20 to $25 range. I definitely have a handful of amazing wines that I can curate and that I do curate in between 15 and 20, and I have a handful in between 30 and 40, but most of them are kind of right at that $20 sweet spot. I call those Monday wines. I can also find you amazing Friday and Saturday wines, those like $30, $40 bottles of wine. But, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday wines, that's what we all like to drink. We want to feel good. We want to open a bottle of wine that's, $20 or less. And then, anytime you buy wine through my retail partner, through Cellar Filler, we always offer a 5% discount on 6 bottles and a 10% discount on 12 bottles. And then the wine club is always very, very well priced at $150 for 6 bottles. And it comes with a sparkling, a white, a rosé, and 3 reds, a light, a medium, and a full bodied. And it's totally customizable. If you're like, I don't really like rosé, I don't like sparkling, or you just want red, or you just want all rosé, white, and sparkling, we can kind of customize it. And it's never $1 more than $150 for the 6-pack.
Awesome. Sammy, tell me, what is your favorite thing about what you do, about your business?
That's an awesome question. I think my favorite thing about wine, and then I'll kind of add on to what I do. My favorite thing about wine is that every bottle of wine has a story. Somebody made it by hand. There's so much science and so much love and earth that goes into a wine. Wine is inherently a natural product. And I just find it to be, so beautiful and so interesting. And there's a story, it's like when you think about the study of wine, you have to understand a lot about different languages. You have to understand geography. You have to understand science. You have to understand art. You have to understand history and culture. All of that goes into wine, because in order to really talk about and say, like, here's some information about this specific wine region in Spain, you have to understand what's happened there before and who the people are. And that's what makes it so beautiful to me, is there's just, no one knows everything about wine. No one's a wine expert. We're all learning together. And that's how I feel. You could never cap on learning everything. You know what I mean? So that's something that I love about it. And what I love about what I do is I just love helping people learn about wine and seeing them get excited, you know, because let's be real, like hashtag mom life or hashtag life in general. If you're not a mom or a parent or whatever, life is hard, and we all like, a lot of us like to drink, and it's so much better to drink something that's more interesting and fun to talk about. And so I love introducing people to wines that they love, and I love getting people excited about drinking cleaner wine and just learning more about how cool wine is.
Oh, I love it. I am so excited for our event. I know that you're going to curate a fabulous selection for us, as you always do. I think one of my favorite things about you being at our event is that you get to introduce wine and different wines to people, because I've been here before, and you know, you're doing your tasting and people are like, oh, I don't really like a white, and you're like, oh, just try it. And there have been so many people converted to different types of wines and open to trying them, because there is such a big taste difference. So if you want to taste the difference, come out Saturday, February 29th, and join us for a fabulous day of shopping, sipping, and healing. Thank you so much, Samara of Cinagro Wine Experience. We cannot wait to see you and to try some of your wines at the end of the month.
Okay. Bye, everyone.